What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be tier ranking all 26 Pixar films. Lightyear just released a few days ago, and I did see it in theaters, so I have been able to catch up with every single Pixar movie. I actually had to go back and watch a lot of the more recent ones over the past couple weeks because I just haven't seen them, because I just haven't really been into Pixar as much as I used to, mainly because I'm just not as into animated films anymore as I used to. Obviously, they are more so geared towards kids. Pixar films definitely do work for all audiences, you know, adults, kids, whatever, but I do feel like they just gear towards kids a little bit more, and I don't find myself enjoying myself watching them as much as I did when I was younger. But that doesn't mean I still don't get a lot out of these movies, and especially like the earlier ones I have a ton of nostalgia for, and I can still see as just brilliant storytelling pieces. And a lot of the recent ones actually are also like that. So I surprised myself with some of these. I didn't expect to like a lot of these as much as I did. And I thought I would just go through and rank all of them, because up until like 2012, I saw all of them before then. But after the ones after that, it's like only a couple of them I actually saw when they first came out. Starting off with Toy Story, which released in 1995. This one is special to me. It has got to be S for sure. I am such a big fan of the Toy Story franchise. Out of all of the like IPs within the Pixar brand, I don't know what you call it, the Pixar company, all the movies under the Pixar company, Toy Story has got to be the best of those franchises that they have, for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the concept alone is such a unique and interesting idea brought to life that a lot of kids probably have thought about before, because that's what you do when you're playing with toys. You're kind of like pretending like they're actually alive. And this movie, you know, takes that concept and actually makes it a reality where the toys are alive and they have to pretend like they're not alive when humans aren't around. It's such an amazing idea for a film, and it works so well because the characters are humanized. They feel like real people, but they're toys. And there's so many different unique toys, and some toys that actually exist in the real world, like Mr. Potato Head, stuff like that. Like, it's really cool to see all this. And I think the thing that makes this movie as good as it is the dynamic between Woody and Buzz. Obviously, the voice acting from Tom Hanks and Tim Allen is just incredible. And this movie's hilarious. Their scenes together are some of the funniest things from any Pixar film. I would say this is definitely the funniest Pixar movie for sure. Maybe that's because it's older, so some of the humor might be a little bit more unironic, just because, I don't know, the animation could be a little wonky sometimes, but it really does make you laugh the way it looks. Like, it's almost like the animation being old in this one makes it better in some ways, which is really interesting. Like, you go back to scenes like Buzz, when he's on the tea party thing, and he's just given up all hope because he realizes who he actually is. I mean, this whole movie is really about identity and who you are and what makes you you, and he realizes he's not actually a space ranger, he's just a toy, and he's just like, you know, going crazy over it. And he has that one funny scene. Like, that's stuff like that is very humorous in this movie. And the character of Sid is so interesting because he's a villain within this movie, but when you really think about it, he's really just a troubled kid who likes to blow up toys in his free time because he's a little reckless. But he's not like a villain, you know, in terms of like, he's not like a terrible person. But this movie makes it seem that way because from the toy's perspective, he is a murderer, which again is so damn interesting how Pixar is able to do that with just a movie about toys. And even though this one doesn't have that much emotion compared to some of the other Toy Story movies, it still has some emotional beats here and there. And as a whole, it's just a very fun adventure. I love Toy Story. It's incredible. Let's move on to A Bug's Life. And this one's kind of probably one of the most average movies here. I'm going to say it's a little bit lower than average though, so I'm going to put it in C. I don't think it's D. I don't think it's like a bad movie. It's just so like boring, I guess. You know, the story is something I've seen plenty of times before. It's not necessarily anything that new. It is taking an interesting concept though, because yes, of course, bugs being alive is an interesting concept in and of itself, but the story and the themes that the movie kind of covers was never that interesting to me. And the animation is pretty rough. And I know it's an older film, of course, but even Toy Story looks a lot better, and that came out a couple years before A Bug's Life. So there's really not much redeemable about A Bug's Life to me. None of the characters are that interesting. None of the characters are memorable. They all kind of look the same in some ways. It's almost kind of hard to tell who's who at some points because the animation's not very detailed and distinct for different characters. So it's just not a movie I think about too much, but it has some rewatchable moments, I guess. So I'm just going to give it C tier just to at least say it's not terrible, but it's also not anywhere close to being a good movie, in my opinion. Toy Story 2, though, is also going to go an S. It has to. I mean, Toy Story as a franchise, like I said before, it just has so many great things to it. But Toy Story 2, although I don't like it as much as the first, I think it does do a great job of building upon the first one, especially with Buzz and Woody being like basically best buds now. They had to kind of build up that relationship in the first one because they obviously were enemies kind of towards each other at the beginning because Woody was jealous of him and then he kind of tried to sabotage him and such. But in the second one, they're all friends now, and Woody gets taken, of course, from the garbage or garage sale thing. And I love how the Toy Story movies are able to integrate different toy concepts that are very interesting about toys and make them work in a personified way in the movie. Like, for example, we go in depth about the idea of like collectors and stuff, collectible toys, and the whole side of toys, which is a whole nother type of thing because you obviously toys are usually meant to be played with, but like adults collect toys, you know, that's an actual thing. And this movie focuses on that with, of course, the character of Al, who's trying to collect toys. He's trying to collect the collection of the Woody's Roundup characters or whatever, and Woody's one of those ones, so he wants to take it for that. So it's just an interesting concept that they're trying to use in this movie. And also the Al's Toy Barn, just getting to explore a toy store is so awesome in this movie. And they have a lot of cool things like Zurg being introduced, which Zurg was a ton of fun in this movie. He actually is kind of like a side villain in and of itself. But then the main villain is, of course, the Prospector, who I think is definitely one of the best villains in Pixar. And he actually is threatening at a certain point, and that whole ending sequence with the plane and so many amazing things in this movie. Of course, the introduction of characters like Jessie and Bullseye were great as well. Toy Story 2 is an S-tier movie. I think this movie focuses on themes even better than the first one, but the first one's just a little bit more like humorous, and I think some of the scenes just are a little bit more rewatchable from the first one. So that's the only reason I put the first one above the second one, but I still love both of them almost equally. Monsters, Inc., I'm gonna put an A, but it would be like the very top of A. It's so close to getting into S because it is an incredible movie. Because just like the past two movies, it's taking a concept that isn't really like something you really could think you could make a movie off of, but because a lot of the Pixar creators are so creative, they were able to make a movie based off of this concept. And that concept is, of course, just monsters being under your bed. That whole sort of, you know, thing where kids are always scared of monsters possibly being under their bed. And usually, of course, they're not. But this movie makes a whole damn universe out of that, where they're making energy by doing that. Like, that's a whole company where they go scare kids and they get energy for it. Like, that's such a weird idea, but it works so well. And then how they make Sully kind of become attached to this girl that he was trying to scare, Boo. And the emotions in this movie between those two characters is just so incredible. And then Mike Wazowski's just there for mainly comedic relief, but he also has a lot of good moments in terms of his friendship with Sully and how that's kind of changed throughout the movie. And it works so well. I couldn't believe that a movie like this would work as well as it does, but it does. Monsters, Inc. is really, really, really great. It's just not on the S tier. I wouldn't put it on the same tier as Toy Story 1 or 2, unfortunately, but it's close. It's very, very close. And Finding Nemo, very, very similar in terms of Monsters, Inc. and how I feel about it. I think it's a really solid movie. I just don't think it's going to be on the same tier as Toy Story and Toy Story 2. But Finding Nemo has so many positives to it. First of all, I love the messages and themes of this movie. Essentially, just don't give up. That's the main message this movie kind of portrays, because of course they're not giving up to Finding Nemo. That's like the whole thing here. They're not going to stop until they find Nemo. And there's this whole phrase that's said over and over again in the movie where they say, just keep swimming. And what I love about this movie so much, and same thing with Toy Story and a couple of the other movies as well, is they take a concept that doesn't seem like it would be intense, but it ends up being intense in the context of the movie. And that in this case would be like, for example, the fishing scene when the fishing net grabs down all the fish and they're grabbing them up. Normally you wouldn't think of fishing as being some scary, intense thing, but in this scene, it makes it such an intense thing and seeing Dory like have to get through that and help all these fish to, you know, get out of the situation was just so well done. And I like a lot like the fish out of water story stuff they do with like Nemo getting stuck in the fish tank in the dentist office. A lot of cool stuff like that this movie does. I just, again, don't think it's on the same tier as these movies. They don't affect me the same way, but I really do like Finding Nemo. It's a great movie. The Incredibles is probably going to go on S as well. The Incredibles is such an outstanding superhero film. This is probably the most action-packed of all of the Pixar movies, and it has great action. Like, if you're gonna want to watch a Pixar movie for its action, you should probably watch The Incredibles. It has some really solid sequences, and the visuals are really, really good for 2005 or 2004, I think it was actually. A lot of great colors, and the characters are just really, really unique in terms of their abilities and their personalities. And I mean, that's another thing. How often do we see superhero families, right? Like, we see a bunch of superhero teams in like Marvel and DC, but how often do we see a family that each and every one of them has a different ability, a different power? And this movie really does a great job, you know, kind of showing how a family would deal with having superpowers and being a superhero team, and how the parents kind of, well, I mean, in this one, Bob is like, he really wants to be involved within being a superhero, but obviously he has other responsibilities he has to take care of, and it kind of gets in the way of his family life. And it focuses a lot on the themes of like work-life balance and how you're able to, or how you should maintain that, how you should try to keep that. And it does all of that stuff very, very well. Incredibles is an incredible movie. As for Cars, the first one, I was never really a big fan of any of the Cars movies, to be honest. None of them really did much for me. I don't know if it was the animation style or the story. I mean, the story is honestly just like any other sports movie, which I do like a lot of sports movies, but honestly, they kind of need to have something more than just being, you know, your stereotypical sports movie for me to really be interested in it. So this one doesn't really do much beyond that. It definitely tells one of the most cliche sports stories it possibly could. So I'm gonna give it a C. It just doesn't do much for me. I don't think the messages are as strong as a lot of these other movies here. I don't think the characters are as strong. I think honestly Lightning McQueen was kind of annoying in this movie for a large portion of it, which I know was the point, but it just didn't sit well with me. So I'm not crazy about Cars. I wish I was, but I'm just not. Ratatouille this might be an unpopular opinion, actually, because I think a lot of people would probably put it higher than this, but I'm going to put it A. I know a lot of people probably would put this in S. It's definitely regarded as one of the better Pixar movies. I really, really love it. I do. I can't possibly put it on the same level as these top ones. And obviously, you'll see by the end, there's going to be a couple more in the S. And I just don't think I could justify putting Ratatouille higher than those. But it is really, really damn good movie. It definitely covers a lot of the themes of living up to different expectations and trying to be the best you could possibly be at certain things, and the fear of failing at these things you're trying to do and failing at your passions, all that kind of stuff. And it really does a great job with it. It's a pretty heartwarming story all around, I would say, as well. It's one of those movies that it's really fun to watch because the style and the aesthetic is so unique and just kind of good to look at. I mean, the different scenes where they're like making food is always just amazing to watch. I mean, I love food, so of course, if they're making any food and I'm watching, even if it's animated food, it just looks so good. I don't know. This movie does a great job with visualizing food and the way they have to make it and such. And it's interesting because it's like he's cooking. He wants to be a cook so badly, but he's a rat, right? And that's like the main plot of the movie is, you know, he wants to do something that he can't do because of who he is. But that's kind of the theme they're going for there, and I really like it. I think it does a great job with that. Again, I just don't think I could put it on S tier with those others. Wally's going S. Wally is so damn good, man. I am a Wally fanboy. It is probably one of the most nostalgic movies on this list for me. I think I watched it when it first came out in theaters when I was, I believe, 8 years old. I was 8 years old when this came out, and I saw it in theaters. And the soundtrack was incredible. That's one thing I really, really loved about it. But I didn't really understand the movie as well as I did when I watched it later on in life, and obviously now when I watch it, it completely hits me a different way. But this movie is probably the most mature Pixar movie we've ever seen. And I think Pixar starts to have a lot of mature movies, especially around this time. Even some of these older ones, they definitely have some mature moments, but like this one, I felt like the themes were beyond what kids could even comprehend, you know what I mean? Which is, I think, one of the strongest things about Pixar movies, and that's the thing I cherish the most about them, is where they're fun for kids, but they still have deep themes that only adults would probably understand. You know, that is what I love. And this movie does great with that. It so many things it talks about. I mean, there's a whole ass apocalypse that happens in this movie because essentially of, you know, industrialism and the lack of taking care of the environment and such, and it leads to catastrophe, and then humans start getting really damn lazy because of how advanced technology is on this spaceship, and then people are all fat and stuff, and all these little chairs to take them around, and they're just, you know, buying products and being consumers, and that's all they are in the society. They don't do anything else than that, and it's just so well done. It's so well visualized. It's a dystopian world. It feels like one of those really great novels you would read about a dystopian world. And I mean, the main character doesn't even speak other than Eve or whatever. He says Eva all the time, but like he doesn't actually speak words, but you can feel the emotion just from the animations, which is so incredible. This is a fantastic movie. S tier by far. And then Pixar hits us with another banger a year later with Up. Also S tier for sure. A lot of people say that it's like only the first 10 minutes that's really, really great, and the rest of it's just like average. I disagree. First 10 minutes, yes, it's a masterpiece. It's probably the best 10 minutes of any Pixar movie. One of the best 10 minutes of any Pixar movie. But the rest of the movie still keeps up with that. I just love how deep this movie is. And it's sad and emotional, but like I just think it's probably the most emotional Pixar. It's one of the most emotional. I don't think it is the most emotional, but it's one of the most emotional. But what I love about it so much is that he meets this kid, right? He meets this kid in this movie, and he's just trying to do this mission. He's just trying to do this mission for his wife. That's all he cares about. He just cares about getting into that damn cannon or the waterfall so he can just, you know, succeed in what he was trying to do for his wife. That's all he wants. And he does it in such a unique way with the balloons out of the house. It's a ridiculous concept, but it's an animated movie. Who the hell cares? But they go on this amazing, fun journey, and that's all he cares about. And he meets this kid who is talking to him about how he really misses his father, and he misses like the little moments they had, the small things. And then it goes back to Carl, who's realizing, I think his name's Carl. The old man's name's Carl, right? Yeah, I believe it was Carl. And Russ is kind of like telling Carl about this thing about his dad, that he misses like those small moments. That's like usually the best moments for the smaller things. And that kind of puts Carl at ease by the end of the movie, because he realizes that it's okay that he didn't do these crazy big adventures with his wife. They never got to do them because the little moments were the things that meant more to her and meant more to him probably anyways. Just some beautiful stuff about that. And then he meets his idol that he's been trying to, you know, meet his whole life, and he's like, oh my god, this is my, like, the guy I've been like idolizing since I was a kid. And it ends up being like this terrible person who's trying to hunt this animal, and then Carl has to go, you know, save this animal now, because he's kind of grown a bond with the kid and with the peacock. I believe his name was Kevin in the beginning parts of the movie. And then it becomes like an action movie at some points towards the end, which was just so well done, so well handled. And I love this movie. It's a fantastic Pixar movie. And then holy shit, another one another one right after that. I mean, those three years consecutive of Pixar were the best 3 consecutive years for sure. I mean, there's nothing will top that consecutiveness between those 3 movies. Toy Story 3 is the best animated movie of all time, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite movies, period. So obviously Pixar, it's gonna stay at the top of the list. I'll say that much. It's definitely staying there. This movie is incredible. And just like Up, a lot of people say that it's only the ending that's incredible, the rest of it's just average. I disagree with that. Yes, the ending's amazing, but I think everything leading up to it is also amazing. Just like the other Toy Story movies, they utilize other toy-related concepts in this one. For example, going off to college and like, you know, having that connection to your toy from your childhood. Should you bring it with you? Should you not? Which I don't think that many people have honestly experienced, because people don't usually have a connection to the toys as much as I feel like Andy did. But Andy had a big connection to his toys, obviously. And I liked that idea, how you were kind of trying to figure out what was he going to do with these toys, and the toys don't know. They have no idea. They don't know what the hell's going to happen. And some of them think they're going to get thrown away because they overhear that. And then some other people think they're going to get taken to a daycare or the attic or whatever it may be. They were okay with the attic at first, but then when they were being taught, they were thinking that they were going to throw in the dump. They're like, okay, we got to get the hell out of here. We got to get to the daycare, and have a lot of them go to the daycare. Whereas Woody's the only one who's like, no, I don't believe that. Andy wouldn't do that to us, because, well, Andy won't give up on Andy. That's the thing about Woody in this movie. He does not give up on Andy. He does not give up, period. That is the type of person he is, which is so important for the end of this movie. And they get to this daycare. Lotso, definitely the best villain from Pixar for sure. I absolutely love this character and how he's used in this movie. And the daycare, again, another location that usually would have a lot of toys at it, where this movie fits perfectly. And the fact that they turn this place into like a prison and they have to escape it, like they have this whole prison escape, is just so damn amazing. And the prison escape scene is so well executed, the whole thing. And I think one of the best things about this movie is actually that all the toys get a spotlight. Toy Story 1 mainly was focused on Buzz and Woody. You didn't really see much of the other toys. Toy Story 2 at least gave the other toys some scenes, but 3 really gives every single toy like a spotlight. Woody is still the main focus, but there's a lot of other toys that have a lot of stuff to do here. Mr. Potato Head does a lot, Ham does a lot, Slinky, they all do a lot of stuff in this movie. They're not just background characters anymore, which I think is so damn great. And then of course the movie gets into the final act, which is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. When they get thrown into the garbage, and they're all sticking together, right? Like they literally only got stuck in the garbage because they were all sticking together. It could have just been one of the aliens getting stuck, or Woody and one of the aliens, but no, they all jumped in with them because they stick together, which is such a beautiful thing. And they get thrown into the garbage, and then they get to that furnace scene, which is, I think, one of the best scenes in film history. When they go into the furnace and they're all stuck and just slowly headed towards fire. And at first they're trying to like reach their way out, you know, they're trying, but they start just giving up one by one. But Woody's the only one to not give up, which again fits with this character, because the whole thing he was in this whole movie, he was not trying to give up on Andy. This one, he was not trying to give up on his friends here, because they kind of came together in the end, and he was not going to give up on them. But there was literally nothing they can do, and he had to accept that in that moment and just say, I'm just going to hold hands with my family and just let it happen, which is so heartbreaking, which is why this is the best scene in my opinion, because of how emotional it is. And of course they get saved, miracle. But then we lead to another incredible scene where Andy's actually giving away his toys to Bonnie, which is also an incredibly emotional scene. And like the farewell to Andy, it's just so well done. It's incredible. It's by far the best movie on this list. And then we got Cars 2. Yeah, I don't like I said, I don't really like the Cars movies that much, but this one, it doesn't even feel like a proper sequel. It feels more like a spin-off, like a Mater spin-off that's turned into like a spy movie. And I don't think it's that interesting. I don't think there's anything about it that's redeemable. It's just kind of there, and I don't get any enjoyment out of watching it. I just don't. I don't know. It's just not for me. Brave, I think I like it a little bit more than Cars 2, but I still would put it on D tier because this movie is also not enjoyable. It's boring. The story is not really interesting. Most of it doesn't even make any sense. It has like 1 or 2 good scenes. I really like the scene where she shoots the arrow through the other arrow to like kind of like prove to her mother that, you know, she can do archery. I kind of like that whole thing where she's trying to like prove her mother wrong about the whole archery thing, but yeah, there's not much more to it. And the animation I don't like either. It doesn't feel like Pixar. It feels very, 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 very different, and not in a good way. Like sometimes you can be different in a good way, but this feels different in like a I don't like the animation way. So Brave's not good. I don't really have anything else to say about it other than it's just not something I like all that much. Monsters University, I'm honestly gonna put in B. I was thinking about putting it in C, but I'm gonna put it in B solely because I actually do feel like it builds upon the characters of Sully and Mike pretty well, and it makes Monsters Inc. an even better movie because of this. I don't usually think all prequels are always necessary, but I'm always welcoming them as a movie if it can at least add to these characters and add to the context of the characters in some way, and it actually does, and it actually does a lot of good universe building as well for the Monsters world. So I like it. It's a fun like college movie. It kind of plays off a lot of college movie tropes, which is cool. And I think it's a fun one. It doesn't have as much emotion as a lot of the other ones, but there's a couple scenes that do. And yeah, I think it's okay. I'm not gonna say it's not, you know, worth being a movie in the first place. I know some people say prequels like this one is just worthless, but no, I think it's okay. Inside Out, it's gonna go pretty high. It's gonna go an S as well. Inside Out was probably the most surprising Pixar movie to me because I saw this in theaters. Actually, I don't know why I did, because I think before this, the couple ones that came out before this, I actually didn't see till recently. I didn't watch Monsters University till a couple months ago. I didn't watch Brave till a couple months ago. I didn't watch Cars 2 till a couple months ago. So like I just stopped. I stopped after Toy Story 3. I just stopped watching the new movies. I guess I was just getting older. I don't know exactly what the reason was, but Inside Out, I forget what the circumstances were, but I saw it in theaters and it blew me away. It really did. Obviously, I'm very much into psychology, so that definitely helps, because that's literally all it's about. It's about emotions and such. But what I think works about this movie so much is that you have two different stories going on, and one is a grounded story of this little girl just kind of coming to age story, where she's just kind of growing up, dealing with moving away from her hometown and having to, you know, go to a new school, make new friends and stuff like that, and dealing with her parents and such. And that's just like a whole grounded story that's going on there. But then on the inside of her mind, that's where all this stuff's going on with these emotions. And it's such a great message this movie has, because Joy is this character who does not want sadness to exist. She does not want Riley to ever be sad, ever. Like, you know, you got to be happy 24/7. We can't have this sadness ever here. Just, you know, go away. And it ends up that does happen. Sadness gets lost away, and therefore in her mind, she can't feel that sad emotion anymore. And that affects Riley's life in the story, which is so damn interesting. And this whole movie, we go through this thing of Joy trying to find sadness, try to get her back, because they need all 5 of those emotions there. They need to have them all within her mind, safe and sound, so when she needs to feel these emotions, she can just feel them. And that's the message of the movie, is you feel whatever you gotta feel. You shouldn't keep things in just because you don't think it's the right thing to feel. You have to feel it, you know what I mean? And this movie does such a great job with that. And the way they deal with, you know, the human mind and things going on there is just so cool. The way they visualize it. And, you know, have characters like, I forget the name, but like the imaginary friend that's within her head, and we see him there. And he's all like sad and upset because she forgot about him. She doesn't think about him anymore. And it's just like so many weird, unique ideas that the most creative minds come up with this stuff. The soundtrack by Michael Giacchino, and this is also really damn amazing. So props to him. I love Inside Out. It's definitely one of my favorite Pixar movies for sure. A lot of movies in S tier, but I will say right now, there is not a single one of these movies down here that is going to also go in S tier. So this S tier is completed. I know that for a fact. That does not mean there's not any good ones down here. That just means they haven't given me an S tier Pixar movie since 2015. So just keep that in mind. The Good Dinosaur is gonna go in D tier. Honestly, I might even put it low. No, I'll put it above Brave. I think the only thing I like more about The Good Dinosaur than Brave is at least the story doesn't have any like things that don't really make sense. It's just the fact that the story is so boring. Like, nothing happens in The Good Dinosaur. I really don't feel like anything of purpose happens. It's just a movie about a dinosaur and a kid kind of being friends and just kind of messing around. Like, there's no really deep themes here that I necessarily find to be all that interesting. It's just a cute little movie that I think is really good for kids. Like, if you have like a 10-year-old who or like not even younger than that, like a 6-year-old who just wants to watch a movie and you want to put something on for them, this is a good movie for them. But I think Pixar works better when it's something that can be watched by any age. And I don't think The Good Dinosaur was that. I think The Good Dinosaur was very clearly a movie that was made for kids. And I just don't really like it because of that, because I'm not a kid anymore. So it's just not a movie for me, and therefore it's going in D. Finding Dory. So Finding Dory, I think, was actually decent. I'm gonna put it in B. I kind of feel similar about it as I do with like Monsters University, where like I think it's a welcome addition to the universe, but I don't think it's like nearly as good as the original one. Actually, it's kind of cool how it's right below Finding Nemo and Monsters University, right below Monsters Inc. That's completely unintentional. But Finding Dory, the only issue I have with it is that it does rehash a lot of what Finding Nemo does, and I don't know if that was a great idea, because I think it would have been better if their sequel went in a very different direction, but it's literally just Dory gets lost because let's just see what happens when she gets lost. And I do like how the focus is on Dory in this one. We get a lot of stuff with Dory, and she's an interesting character for sure. But I don't think they handle everything all that well in this movie. I just really like the aquarium edition, how they go to an aquarium for the location, because that's very different than spending most of the movie either in the tank or in the ocean. So an aquarium, it was cool, a cool addition. I liked it. A lot of ridiculous stuff in this movie that's a bit too like, I know it's an animated movie, so it's not really like it matters that much, but there's some sense of logic that should be there in some of these movies, and I don't think this movie has like even a sliver of logic, so that's something. Cars 3, like I said, I don't really like Cars that much, but it's better than A Bug's Life. It's just not better than the first Cars, definitely better than the second Cars. So yeah, I think it's cool how it like focuses on him training someone towards the end, but I don't think it's, yeah, it doesn't do enough for me to really care about the story as well. It still feels like it has a lot of those cliche sport stories that I've seen a million times, and it doesn't really do anything all that interesting or unique with it. And it does rehash some of the stuff from the first one as well. So I'm not crazy about it. I just, the Cars movies just never sat well with me. I just never really cared for them that much. Now, Coco, I actually just watched this for the first time just about a week ago, actually, maybe like 2 weeks ago. And I'm gonna put this in A tier, right above Ratatouille. I really like this one. I think it dealt with a lot of interesting themes about death and the afterlife and all that, and the way they kind of visualized it was just really, really well done. This is actually one of the most emotional Pixar movies as well, especially towards the end when Miguel's playing that song for his grandmother, or his great-grandmother, and she kind of starts crying about it and you know, singing back, because this movie does a great job of kind of explaining how important music is and how impactful music can be and how it can bring back memories, and it could kind of trigger things in your memory that words really can't. And it's cool how it's like music's like forbidden because of the past of this family, and Miguel's trying to like get past that because how much passion he has for music. He kind of has to deal with that debate between tradition of what the family wants, but also what he's passionate about, what he cares about. And I think it's a really fun journey, this movie, you know, what Miguel goes on through going through the afterlife basically, and slowly becoming one of them, but by the end of it, kind of overcoming it. And the way he does that is with music to his great-grandmother. And I like a lot of the twists as well, like the one guy being villainous. We first thought it was his great-grandfather, and then it ended up not being him, or his great-great-grandfather. Yeah, there's a lot of greats and grandfathers, a lot of family stuff going on here. Very family oriented movie, visually stunning too, probably the best looking Pixar movie in terms of visuals and the color, so that's a huge plus. It has a lot of great music as well. I think this was just a really solid Pixar movie. It's not gonna go in S tier though, because I mean, come on, how can you compare against these greats up here? You just can't. Incredibles 2 is gonna go on the B tier, I think. I think this was okay. I just think it was kind of disappointing, and my biggest issue was pretty much everything with everyone but Mrs. Incredible. Like, Mrs. Incredible was the only character who really had a big focus in terms of like the actual main story, and then Bob and the rest of the family, like, they just were dealing with family life stuff, and I didn't think it was all that interesting. I think they kind of dropped the ball with that. And I don't necessarily think even the main villain was that interesting. I just liked seeing Mrs. Incredible in the spotlight kicking some ass. I thought she was cool. But why'd you gotta throw away the rest of the family for most of the movie? I don't see the point of that. It was still a really fun, action-packed movie with a lot of great scenes and a lot of great visuals, so I'm not gonna say that it's bad or anything. It's just, it was disappointing because The Incredibles was so amazing, so to kind of not be as good was, yeah, definitely disappointment, but still, it works, and I think it was decent. And speaking of disappointments, Toy Story 4. It's gonna go an A. It's gonna go an A, but it should have been an S. It should have been an S along with the others, and unfortunately it wasn't, because I will say this was a disappointing movie. Now, disappointing does not mean bad. It does not even mean not good. You can still have a really good movie that's still disappointing. But this one, just to me, was a little disappointing. And the reasons why I think it was disappointing is mainly because it didn't have the focus that I wanted it to on a lot of the other toys. It was mainly a Woody movie. Like, I think this movie honestly could have just been called Woody and it would have worked better, which makes sense because Toy Story 3 was like the definitive ending, whereas Toy Story 4 was an epilogue for Woody to kind of finish off his character arc, which I think was great. But when you kind of just throw away the rest of the characters, it feels a little weird. It just feels weird not having the other characters doing like anything in this whole movie, whereas in the third one, they were doing like everything. So I think I would have maybe liked it more if it was just called Woody, and I would have gone into it expecting just a Woody movie, but I didn't go into it expecting just a Woody movie. I went into it expecting a Toy Story movie, and it just didn't give that for me. And the movie also gets a little bit lackluster being in the same location that I didn't think was that interesting of a location for the whole movie, where they're in this antique store. It was cool for a little bit, but I didn't really enjoy it nearly as much as some of the other Toy Story locations, and they stayed in this antique place the whole damn movie. I think the carnival was fun, though. The carnival was cool. Seeing them outdoors in that sort of environment was fun for the toys. But I think the way this rounds up Woody's character was phenomenal. That is what makes this movie A tier for me, is that Woody's character has this amazing arc here where he finally realizes that he doesn't need to have someone to play with him. He doesn't need that. He needs to just be himself. He needs to become independent and realize that he can be on his own and try to help other toys who maybe lost their owners or don't have anyone to kind of just find purpose in life without being just a toy, you know what I mean? And I really, really like that story for him. And there's another really emotional scene towards the end where he's kind of saying goodbye to Buzz and the rest of the gang. It's a really well done movie. It is. I just wish they marketed it differently because it became so disappointment because of how it was marketed. I didn't think it was going to be just a Woody movie. So that's just my opinion. I don't know how many people agree with me on that, but it's still a great movie. It's going to go an A for sure, obviously. Next up is Onward. I'm honestly going to put this down in the C tier. I would probably like Onward more if they expanded more on some of the more touching moments between the brothers, because they do a great job with that at the end of the movie. The last like 20 minutes of this movie is actually really good when they're kind of like at that final battle scene and the sacrifice that the I forget the names of the characters, to be honest, because they're not that memorable. But Tom Holland's character, he gives Chris Pratt's character the ability to see his father instead of him, because he realizes that at least he's, you know, had a connection with him before, so he should see him for the last time for a little bit, whereas I never even had one in the first place, and I already kind of have a father figure, and he was talking about Chris Pratt's character being his father figure. So I think that was beautiful, and that was a really amazing scene that made it go into C tier. But the rest of the movie, all before it, was just this really boring adventure that I didn't find interesting. There was not a single bit of it that I found fun. Some of it was kind of cringy. I don't know. There was a lot of like the scenes with like the mom and stuff I never found to be good in any way, shape, or form. So Onward's just not one of the movies that I've necessarily found to be that great, but those last 20 minutes were phenomenal. So that definitely keeps it out of D tier. Soul is a movie that is also very mature, I would say, except for some of the stuff with the cat. Once they like had the voice change thing, that's when I was like, okay, this is not as mature as I thought, but you could still have fun, goofy stuff like that with still having mature themes. And it does have mature themes because the stuff going on between this character and especially his mother and stuff and the people around him is very deep stuff, because it's basically, this movie is about like taking things for granted and trying to be the best you can possibly be rather than just enjoying what you have. You could still, try to get better at things, but the problem with this main character here is that he can't even appreciate the fact, like the things in his life, because he just wants to be this famous musician. Whereas he's already having a lot of great connections with people as a music teacher, and he doesn't see being a music teacher as something that's that great. And neither does the people around him, to be honest, but he kind of learns throughout the movie that he is grateful for that, and that is something he loves doing, and it's okay that he's not this famous musician. And he has to find that through this whole journey in this kind of afterlife-y type universe as this little blue soul thing. I think it has a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens, but I don't necessarily think it's that great. I think a lot of people kind of hype this one up a little bit too much compared to how I actually feel about it, but it's still a good Pixar movie. I still enjoyed it to a degree. I don't think I'd be putting it in A tier or S tier for sure. Luca, I'm actually going to put just one spot above Soul. I just watched Luca a few days ago, and I actually thought it was pretty good. I really liked the messages this movie had in terms of, it was a very, we've seen this before, obviously, this message where it's, accept differences and don't judge people based on their differences and such. And obviously that being this thing between the sea monsters and the humans, how they kind of like, they hate each other. Like the sea monsters are like, all the humans are bad. The humans are like, all the sea monsters are bad, but they don't really know each other. They don't get to, look at each other and really get to know one another, because they just see their differences and they go, no, I can't like you because we're different, which is, again, a message and a theme that's been in many movies, but I think it's done pretty well here. It's a very small scale movie that works. I don't think every Pixar movie has to be crazy in scale, but I really, really do like this story, and I think it has a lot of promise, but I don't necessarily think it's, again, because it doesn't have the deepest themes in the world that necessarily are that unique, and the characters are not that memorable, in my opinion at least. It's not going to be on A tier or S tier, but I really like the movie for what it is. Turning Red for me was, just not interesting. Again, this is really one of those things where it depends on the person. Like even The Good Dinosaur, like I'm sure there's kids out there who think this is the greatest movie of all time because they just really, really had a fun time with it and they really like dinosaurs, and that just kind of made the movie work for them. But Turning Red just did not work for me. I don't really think the story was interesting. I didn't find any of the characters to be in any way, shape, or form compelling to really care about what was going on in the movie. And I don't think the plot was that interesting either. It kind of had some similarities to Brave in a lot of ways, but I think Brave at least did it just a tiny bit better. And it got a little bit ridiculous in some scenes too. Like I really hated the scene where she was like twerking as a panda, and she's like 13, and this is a Pixar movie. I don't know. It was just stuff like that. I was just like, what am I watching? So I didn't have fun with it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't think it was that great. I think a lot of people enjoyed it quite a bit. And if you did, I'm happy for you. But I just did not feel that way at all. Lightyear. Lightyear is, of course, the most recent, and I don't believe we're actually going to be getting another Pixar movie for quite a while. I think the next announced one is not going to come out till like 2023. So how do I feel about Lightyear? It's a tough one, because I think it's a good movie. I think it has a good story, but it doesn't feel like any other Pixar movie, and not in a good way, because it doesn't have that emotion and that message and that theme that most Pixar movies, not all, obviously not all of them do, but most have and should have. This one just kind of feels like a generic space adventure action sci-fi movie with the main character being Buzz Lightyear. Was it fun? Was the story within it actually pretty good? Yeah, I would say so. I think it was actually pretty funny too. Actually, it wasn't that funny. It was just the cat character, what was his name, Socks. He was funny, but everything else wasn't that funny. But he was in a lot of the movie, and he made every scene funny. The twists that they had there, I think, was interesting. Was it great? I don't know about that, but I think it's just a cool idea because it's the movie that Andy saw when he was a kid and got him interested in Buzz. I think it's a cool concept for a Pixar movie. I think they could have made it have more emotion. They could have made it have more themes, and I think it would have been a lot better. But as it is, I'm just going to give it B. I think just it being this really fun adventure film with a lot of decent action is enough for me to at least consider it decent. So yeah, B tier sounds good. So yeah, this is my completed list here. I did do it within the order that I would rank them. So yeah, you can look through this. This is my number 1. This is my last place, and you can just kind of go up and down the thing. I don't think I'm going to change anything. Everything kind of looks good to me. I think this is exactly how I feel about the Pixar movies. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I will see you all in my next one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Peace out.